difficulty was diseases of the eye. I chanced to be passing the dissecting room, where unclaimed corpses were laid out for our study, when I heard an unusual, dull thumping noise coming from within. Wondering whether a casement had somehow been left open and was moving in the breeze, I opened the door and peered in. The sight that met my eyes shocked me to a standstill. 2 bodies were ready for the knife, one that of a poor fellow in his 20s who had died following surgery, and another of an older man for whom surgery had not come in time. Standing over them was a figure like the physical embodiment of death itself. Holmes was very tall, at least 6 feet in height, but so slender that he appeared even taller. His profile was highly distinctive, with a prominent nose like a hawk's beak and a firm chin. If it is possible to read character in a face, my impression at that moment was one of a purposeful, determined, single-minded individual, never to be deflected from a goal once he had it in his sights. But it was his actions which astounded me. He was grasping a stout stick in one hand and using it to belabor the corpse of the younger deceased. I was about to conclude that he really was insane, as had been reputed, affected perhaps by the strain of long hours of study, but then on hearing the door he paused in his actions and turned to face me. I was immediately struck by his pale features, intense stare, and glittering eyes, but they were not the eyes of a madman. I was seeing the penetrating, almost mesmerizing gaze of an observer. He straightened, and the few tendrils of dark hair that had been disturbed by his efforts were carefully smoothed back into place by long, slim fingers. He smiled and beckoned me forward. "Come in and see this," he exclaimed. Perhaps it was the fact that I did not immediately back away in horror and run from the room, but actually dared enter to see what he was doing, which eventually led to his sharing some fragments of information about his work. Holmes revealed that he was conducting an experiment to show whether or not it was possible to produce bruises on a corpse. This issue had apparently been of great importance in a recent criminal trial. He was therefore working with corpses of all ages and dimensions and assaulting them with a variety of implements. I saw a single stick, a poker, a walking cane, a bamboo switch, and a cudgel on the bench. He was also making copious notes and sketches of his results, with the intention of writing a monograph on the subject. Eventually he introduced himself. He was my own age, just 22, and had enrolled at Bart's the previous autumn after coming down from university. When we shook hands, I found his grip remarkably and unexpectedly powerful. What other experiments he was engaged in were not discussed then, but the state of his hands told me a great deal. As every medical student knows, when a drop of blood is required in the laboratory, one's own fingers are the most convenient source. However, it was clear that Holmes took this to excess, and his fingers were not only stained with ink and marked with chemical burns, but dotted with small strips of plaster. "I see you study chemistry as well as medicine," I said. "Chemistry and anatomy," he corrected me. "I do not undertake formal medical training. But I will not detain you further. I perceive that you are on your way to report to Professor Platt to deliver an important paper, and he does not like to be kept waiting." I took my leave, and had actually reached the professor's department before I wondered how Holmes had deduced where I was bound and why, as I certainly had not mentioned it. He was not an easy man to get to know, and perpetually mysterious in that no one could ever learn to what end he was pursuing his varied and vigorous studies. It may seem naive of me not to have realized that Holmes' true intentions were to become a consulting detective, but he was the first of that profession, the first and the best, and I suppose my imagination did not stretch that far. Watson himself, as I later discovered when I read his memoirs, never guessed the truth, even after several weeks of their sharing lodgings. At the time, therefore, I concluded that Holmes was a gentleman of independent means, who, unlike so many idlers of this world, wished to acquire knowledge on any subject as the fancy took him, and addressed himself to the solution of problems as an exercise.